But the Houston Peace and Justice Center is involved with so many different activities. We have a few events of our own, such as this dinner every year, and we also have a conference every year. This year, the conference. Well, we did two conferences this year. We did one called an Environmental Justice Encuentro that Dr. Bullard was the keynote speaker for, and we did that in conjunction with some other organizations. It was held at the Texas Southern University. We also had another conference in conjunction with the Civil Rights Coalition in September. We're one of several organizations to sponsor that. We also have Peace Camp every summer, and you got a little flavor of some of that from the Peace Camp children that came up here earlier. But we get involved in a lot of other organizations. Part of our mission involves supporting and connecting with each other, because if you think about like the examples here on the slideshow, frankly, most of these were organized by other organizations, but we join in with other groups. And we have so many different interests that I know we have compatible interests, but some of us are more interested in environmental issues, some are more interested in peace, some are more interested in human rights and other kind of justice issues. But the important thing is we want to help support each other, because one thing we found is the right wing, they don't have to divide to conquer us if we're already divided. And together we can work together and we can do so much more. And I want to remind everybody to think about that. And one of the things HPJC wants to do is to help publicize your events. If you have activities that are going on that your organization is sponsoring, we want other people to know about it. And we want to encourage everybody to come and support each other. One of the ways we do that is through our website. Most of the events posted on our homepage of our website, again, are not our events. They're other people's, they post them. You can post your own event there. We encourage you to do that. Go to hpjc.org. And as your event gets closer, we'll try to move it up to the front page. Things have been kind of busy the last week, so we've been a little behind on updating the website. Events that are posted on our website also are included in a twice-a-month email newsletter of a calendar of events. And it goes out to over 3,000 people in the Houston area. And so if you post your activities on our website, they'll also go out in that newsletter. If you're not already getting that newsletter, you can sign up real easily by going to hpjc.org, and there's a link, there's a little box, you give your email address in the bottom of the right column of our homepage. But HPJC wants to do a lot more. We have Peace Camp, as I mentioned. We have an annual conference. We support other organizations' activities. We would like to do much more, and it all depends, frankly, on your support. And that's part of why we want to do this. We want to thank all of you for all the things that you've helped make possible, both within your own organizations and also for HPJC. So I really want to thank you all. And maybe just give each other a round of applause for supporting all these wonderful activities. But we want to do more. I'll just give a couple of examples. So there's some examples in the little trifold color brochure that are on that's sort of a newsletter, not the trifold, I'm sorry, the little color newsletter that has some color photos on it. It has just a few examples. I'll just give an example of Peace Camp. Right now we have 2 weeks of Peace Camp a year at 2 different locations that are open to the public. We have another week that's done, it's not open to the public, it's for the women and children at the Houston Area Women's Shelter, which has people, trying to get away from abusive environments from their husbands or boyfriends. And we would like to do a lot more of those. We'd like to have camps at many more locations in Houston and for more weeks of the year. And we would like to have it especially for people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford to come. We have scholarships that people offer so that we can have people attend who wouldn't be able to afford it. But we'd like to do much more. We'd like to have more activities like the ones that you see in on the slideshow. We'd like to really have a really great conference this next year. The one next year is going to be on peace and military policy. And we don't have a date yet confirmed. It's probably going to be in April. So watch for this newsletter as I was talking about, the email newsletter, and our website. We'll be telling people more about that. We'd really like to make that big, because I know that's one of my personal interests. I really like all the stuff HPJC is doing, but I want to create a more peaceful world. Sorry, I get kind of tired. Things are get a little emotional. Sometimes we're a little kind of tired from lack of sleep before these dinners. But, you know, our country, and I'm sure Medea's probably going to talk about this, our country could do so much more. It could really lead the planet in peace and in finding peaceful alternatives to war and conflict. The Peace Camp children learned about this, and we'd like adults to learn about it too. We'd like to be thinking about how we can help support each other and spend a little bit less money, maybe a whole lot less money on our military and more on helping people and on human rights and the people that are working hard and just cannot make it on their own because of the oppressive and economic system that we have. So there's so much more we can do, and if you would like to help support this kind of stuff, help to support this work, I hope you will look at the brochure on your table. The little trifold brochure has a membership application in it. One of the things you can do to help besides coming to this dinner is to join HPJC for a donation of $25 a year per person, for example, or you can join as an organization. If you'd like to make additional donations, we'd like to have that too, because that's the kind of thing that makes us stronger and enables us to do a lot more work for peace and justice, environmental affairs, and all kinds of other things. So I invite you to do that. You can fill out the little form on the trifold brochure and leave a check if you'd like. Put it in one of the envelopes. There's some envelopes on your table also addressed to HPJC. And we have somebody that's going to be going around with, is it baskets? Deb, where do we have the... Well, we'll be doing that in a little while. We'll have some baskets or some containers that we'll be collecting them on. So we'll make another announcement later. But we encourage you to make a donation to help support our work or to become a member of HPJC. But also we want you to support each other and help all of our great organizations in the Houston area to do more. So just thank you all for all your work. And I'm going to turn this over to Deb Shafto in just a minute. As soon as here we are. Deb Shafto is another board member of HPJC. She's been involved in so many organizations. She's really a terrific, wonderful person. I'll just tell you a little personal story real quick. You know, we met each other maybe 25 years ago. We actually live in the same neighborhood by coincidence at a precinct convention. And I remember she and her husband George, you know, and the two of my wife and I were at a precinct convention, and we were wanting to present resolutions about peace. Let's spend less money on war. Let's help protect human rights and the environment. And it was so good to have Deb and George support the same kind of stuff. And she's really been committed for so many years also. And I know, excuse me, I know there's so many other stories all of you could share like that, but she's a really wonderful activist, and we're really lucky to have her part of HPJC. So Deb Shafto.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that makes it so important for me is when I first started coming to these banquets, here were all these people, not this many, but a number of people. There was a time in Houston where we were trying to get a peace march when Reagan was trying to invade Honduras. And Lee Lowe had a list from the Houston Post that she had gleaned name by name from letters to the editor. And I took that list and tried to get activists together, and all together, 35 of us walked down Bel Air Boulevard in protest of the war. And look around you now. Look around you now. There are so many things going on in Houston that you can't get to them all. And the wonderful thing about this, and the reason we want your support, is because this is the time when we all get together and support each other's causes. There are people in this room of varied religions, beliefs, and activities, things that they think are important, but to us they're all important, and we want a unified backing. This last election has showed us, I think better than ever before, that we need a unified direction. We need to sit down and think about what's coming up, and who better to do it than this group of wonderful people gathered here in celebration of peace. We were going to have some volunteers. Do we have those volunteers? George, would you volunteer? The individual membership is small. It is naturally the money, I'm not saying the money doesn't mean anything, but the real important thing is joining together and being one effort and one group, supporting all good causes. And so we ask you to put a bill in, as Joe Marcinkowski just did, or to enroll as member. Put your name up. There's an application right on the table, and we're hoping that you will join us in this, not just for this wonderful dinner, but for all year, for the struggles we're all involved in. Oops, I'm out of things to say. While we're collecting, perhaps we could finish up and go to dinner, and then we will start our presentations for the evening. It's a good time. Even if you can only give a little bit, it helps, and you get the feeling of contributing, which is not small. Our first awardee will be presented by Madeline Crozat-Williams. She is an artist herself and a promoter of art in Houston, an entrepreneur, an owner of Las Manos Mágicas, which is now a store online. She is a motivator of Move to Amend, a longtime supporter and Houston leader of Code Pink. Madeline, thank you for your very many great contributions to this city and please come up. Oh, there you go. I'm looking all over for you. Okay.
About this time in 2003, I went to the Station Museum to see the Made in Palestine exhibit. Jim Harithus happened to meet me at the door and told me that the show was coming down the same day. When I told him that I was a member of Code Pink, he told me that he admired what Code Pink did and proceeded to very graciously take me on a personal tour. I had never met Jim before. This very cordial and unpretentious man had been the director and a curator at the prestigious Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston. Some years after he left the CAM, he gave Houston two amazing gifts which changed the Houston art landscape. He founded the Station Museum of Contemporary Art and the Art Car Museum. An article in the Houston Press said, "There are no better artistic agent provocateur than Jim and Ann Harithus in the Station. The Station has presented highly charged contemporary art from Palestine, as well as an exhibition of work addressing the missing and murdered women of Juarez." So before you step into the Station Museum of Contemporary Art, be forewarned, it ain't going to be pretty, it's going to be glorious and challenging. And the Brooklyn Rail stated, thanks to Harithus, the Station Museum consistently mounts exhibitions that no other American art institution has the guts or vision to tackle. To quote Jim himself, "I think some curators should take risks on a lot of levels. I believe that it's a moral obligation to make this kind of artistic information available to a public that has been rendered somewhat clueless by constant commercial and government propaganda." Thank you, Jim Harithus, for your wonderful gift to Houston. The station's website says this about their mission. In addition to showing the work of local, national, and international artists that represent Houston's cultural diversity, the museum organizes exhibitions that question our society's morality and ethics. It embraces the idea that art plays a critical role in society as an agent of creativity and civil discourse and as a resource that deepens and broadens public awareness of the cultural, political, economic, and personal dimensions of art. In addition to its exhibits, the station also presents programs and lectures that promote peace and social justice and challenge the political status quo. One of my strongest memories of the museum is hearing Black Panthers speak about the horrors of Angola prison in Louisiana. I am very pleased to introduce to you Jim Harris and present this Local Peacemaker Award to the Station Museum of Contemporary Art. I'd now like to read the award. Houston Peace and Justice Center is proud to recognize and honor the Station Museum of Contemporary Art for being a space where the boundaries of art and politics are controversial, cutting edge, and courageous, for showcasing artists whose works offer perspectives seldom highlighted, for enriching our city through unique and thought-provoking exhibitions that also foster connection and community. And I present to you Jim Harris to receive.
Thank you. I was so surprised that we were going to be honored that, let me tell you, I'm still moved by it and a little embarrassed, maybe. But some of what she said may be true. But anyways, the museum, I'll just say a few words about the museum, then I'll tell you what I'm really interested in and what I'm most proud of. Museum, we started the museum as soon as we found space near the community college, because we thought this would be a perfect place where students could really get the museum experience. They weren't going to get it at the Museum of Fine Arts and the rest of it. It really had to be there. So that was really important to us to be able to work, and that was our first goal, was to give them an experience that was relevant. In order to make the experience relevant, we had to really start thinking about doing exhibitions from the various countries. If you look at our major museums, the focus is always Europe and the dominance of Europe in the arts. So we weren't really too interested in that, and we've been Europeanized enough. So we decided to look further afield. Thus, in order to do the Palestinian exhibition, we spent a month in Gaza and in Palestine, and finally, in order to really show the art side of that culture. And what we found there, I thought it was pretty extraordinary. I learned a couple of things that were amazing to me. The first thing I didn't quite understand, which I understood better later on, was the fact that the women Palestinian artists were more way out, more advanced, more experimental than the men. And this came as a little bit of a surprise to us, but when I thought about it, it was obvious. The men were tied to history. The women had not been given much room in history, and we're no longer tied to history, and we're free to move on. And I thought that was generally true. We continued, we did, after the Palestinian show, which interestingly enough is still moving. The Palestinian show left. We had it at the museum, then it went to San Francisco, it went to New York, and it went to Washington, and then it went to Lebanon, and it's still traveling. So this is like 6 or 7 years. And the show was really about a people wanting to reveal themselves truly to the public. So it was really about their history. We actually have some Palestinian works on view right now at the museum for you all to see. But from Palestine, we really felt seriously that we had to do the wars, and so we went to Colombia, where we did a first major exhibition about Colombia, and certainly the first exhibition about that war, and about the U.S. complicity in that war. We did an exhibition from Congo, same thing. We did we've done exhibitions from about 16 countries now. And what we do is we actually go to the country and dive into the culture and try to figure out what's going on and try to find works that would be relevant to what we're doing, but mainly to the people, because, we learned that there were 40,000 Palestinians living in Houston, but there was no reference for them in any of the museums or any of the institutions to speak of. Well, that was true of Colombia. A lot of Colombians living here, but no reference in the museum to another great art tradition that goes back in history. So we felt that was part of our duty, was to do as much as we could to, bring this material to the surface. That's it? I got 2 more minutes. Anyways, the museum's there. You all are welcome to come see it. We'll do our best to take you through. We're a staff of 4. We're a museum that's concerned as much with this community, and we've done a lot of programs relating to this community. We've had a lot of speakers. We're lucky enough to have Dennis Kucinich come, etc. Okay. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about, in 1 minute, the exhibition that's coming up. And the exhibition, what I became concerned about immediately, and the rest of the other 3 members of staff became concerned about, was the fact that a very short time ago, there were 52,000 children on the border, and then all of a sudden it was dropped, and we don't know what happened to them. Or did we know? Or did we? And then we started, because our next exhibition will be devoted to the border again. It will be the second time that we've tried to do something. And these were mothers and children from places like Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. Now, I've been to all of those countries, and I see how desperate their situation is. I also know it's very clear that we sent gang members. Many of them were actually born in America, the rest back there, because on the trips that I took in that area, I would run into gang members, and they would say, well, yeah, I'm from East LA, whatever, I'd like to go home, but we can't go home anymore, right, whatever. So the gangs, actually, we had a lot to do with making the gangs flourish down there. And those gangs have been actually destroying people. If any of you saw the newspaper article that said how many people were being killed and raped and put in unmarked graves, that's it. Now, it seems to me that in America, 52,000 kids, it would have been nothing for us to absorb them. After all, we absorbed all the people from New Orleans during that hurricane. It would have been nothing. I was shocked that we forgot about them, or we were forced to forget about them. But anyways, in this exhibition, we're going to try to make this clear again, so that people can judge for themselves and come to grips with this terrible thing that's taking place. And in those countries, I just feel for those people, the mothers and the rest of them, desperately trying to save their children, and end up in detention centers in, there are 2 huge ones outside of San Antonio. We have a big detention center outside the airport here in Houston, et cetera. There are detention centers all over. And these poor kids are being put into jails. They're exactly prisons. They're no more or less prisons than the prisons that we saw in Palestine. I mean, Gaza was a prison. So anyways, that's my speech. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Our next presenter of the award is Jamila Gomez. Where is she? Right here. There you are. Come on up. In addition to being outrageously beautiful, she is a graduate student in urban planning and environmental policy and an activist in environment and land use planning, and the personification of the dreams we oldsters have about the next generation. Hardworking, smart, active, and willing. Jamila.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Today, I have been asked to introduce someone who has played a very vital role in my life as a student and also as an advocate in the environmental justice movement. I met Dr. Robert Bullard at my alma mater, Clark Atlanta University, in my junior year, as he was my teacher for my special topics class. In that classroom, that is where I was formally introduced to the concept of environmental justice. During the course of the semester, Dr. Bullard granted myself, along with my other peers, the opportunity to attend Power Shift 2011 in Washington, D.C., where we presented in behalf of his absence. It was there where I had my first experience of what it meant to be an advocate for environmental justice. As I embarked on my journey to graduate school, unknowingly, Dr. Bullard would become my dean. I never would imagine that he would also act as a hands-on mentor. As a Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland Scholar, under his tutelage, I have been exposed to more than I can even share with you all tonight. Dr. Bullard wears many hats, but he can agree that the one that he proudly wears is the one of a teacher. Today, I am honored to introduce him as he receives this Peacemaker Award. Many of you know him as the father of environmental justice, but I simply know him as one of my greatest teachers and mentors. So please stand and give a round of applause to Dr. Robert Bullard.
Good evening. I'm really honored to be here this evening and accept this award. You know, it's important to understand that the best reward that a teacher can get is for one of his students to say good things about him. And I am a teacher. I love teaching. I'm a researcher. I love doing research. I like to write. I like to, I've written 18 books. But the fact that I can stand in a classroom and I can project, and you never know who's listening as a teacher. If you got 100 students in a classroom, you never know if 5 are listening or if all 100. But when you have a student, as Jamila, she was a sophomore. She took my class, a special topic, and we did a research project, and I was supposed to present the project in Washington, D.C., and I had 3 students that were very good students. I felt confident that they could present this research as if I were there. The fact that I'm a sociologist by training. I'm an environmental sociologist. I received my master's degree in sociology from Atlanta University in the Department of Sociology that was founded by W.E.B. Du Bois. My alma mater, Atlanta University, was founded in 1865 by the Freedmen's Bureau to educate former slaves. So following the footsteps of W.E.B. Du Bois, as a researcher, as a scholar, as an activist, as someone who wants to make change and make a difference, that's one of my heroes. So the work that I do and the work that I've done for the last 35, 40 years, and I must admit that the fact that when I graduated from Iowa State University, I know there are some colleagues and friends from Iowa. Iowa was very good to me. My first job when I got out of graduate school, was Texas Southern University. That's where I got my start, in this city. I stayed here 14 years and went to California, Atlanta, and back. I'm really glad to be back in Houston. I know much more today than I knew in 1987 when I left. The city has changed a lot, but there are some things that have not changed, and we must change them. The environmental issues that confront us, the health issues that confront us, the inequality issues that confront us have been so intransigent, have not changed. In some ways, they've gotten worse. We must address inequality today. We can't wait until 2050 when this country is majority people of color. We have to start right now and plan for that new majority. So when we talk about addressing, this whole issue of peace, justice, and ending war, ending poverty, ending hunger, these are human rights issues that we must stand to the front and stand firm despite the last election. We got to have a ground game. We have to have a ground game. And I am proud to say that I'm biased. I'm biased on the side of justice, fairness, and equity. We have to fight for that next generation, And so we just can't be sprinters. The issues that we're dealing with today are so important that it's not just a marathon, it's a relay marathon. You run your 26 miles and you pass it off to the next group that's going to run another 26 miles. And I know there's some folks out here, I can look at the gray hair, that you run 26 miles and we got to pass it off to the next generation. Thank you very much.
Dr. Bullard, this award is from the Houston Peace and Justice Center, and it is proud to recognize and honor you for allowing the seed of environmental justice that found its way to your doorstep to grow, for nurturing a multi-ethnic, multiracial movement that encouraged community leaders to emerge, for allowing your heart and mind to work together to champion justice for the most vulnerable in our society. This is for you.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Dave Atwood, and I'm particularly happy everybody knows Dave Atwood. Dave Atwood appears for everybody's cause, everywhere, all the time. I particularly remember his being invited to a radio broadcast that Laura Ingraham hosted, in which we thought we would be a coherent voice of the left and reason. We were, in fact, invited to be the whipping boys of the right. And actually the far right. Laura held in her hand a clicker, and anytime Dave would want to make a point or be halfway into a point, she'd go to an advertisement quick, so that he wouldn't be able to get two consecutive words out. I think Dave's response to Laura Ingraham speaks volumes to his commitment to nonviolence. Dave has put high-energy inputs and efforts into HPJC, Pax Christi, anti-death penalty work, immigration reform, and nearly any cause that supports the growth of our vision of the beloved community. Two of his nonviolent books were in our raffle. He's not only a committed activist, he's a published author. Dave Atwood.
I want to start tonight by giving a shout out to Jim Harithus in the Station Museum, because he has hosted us twice. I don't know if you remember it, Jim, but twice, programs on the abolishment of the death penalty. We did it at one time at the Art Car Museum and one time maybe twice at the Station Museum. So we really want to thank you for doing that. That was wonderful. And thank you to Dr. Bullard for hosting that wonderful environmental conference. I listened to his talk, and believe me, if you don't ever listen to a talk, listen to Dr. Bullard's talk on environmental justice. It is wonderful, it's revealing, and somehow you got to listen to that talk because it's a fantastic presentation. So thank you, Dr. Bullard, for that. It is indeed an honor for me to present the Local Peacemaker Awards to our 5 young, dynamic Latinas: Janelle Robles, Maria Shaquin Espinoza, Marianela Acuna, Diana Gomez Mendoza, and Sylvia Chicas. Would you all please come up here? You know, it doesn't get any better than this. Maria Shaquin couldn't be here tonight, but her beautiful and wonderful mother, Carmen Shaquin, is here to accept the award for her. I've known these 5 young women for several years now. I have seen them work in organizations supporting worker rights, immigrant rights, women's rights, and voter rights. I have seen them leading marches, rallies, and protests. They are an inspiration to watch in action. They are a formidable force for peace and justice in our community. They are role models for other young people. Their presence in our community ensures a brighter future for all of us. Janelle Robles, where's Janelle? Janelle, right back here. This is Janelle, all right? Janelle Robles has worked for the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition and the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund and Educational Fund, the Fe and Justicia Worker Justice Center, and the Central American Resource Center. She is a graduate of the University of North Texas and is currently a second-year law student at South Texas College of Law. Janelle. Marianela, over here on the end. The shy one. But believe me, she's not shy when she wants to do something. Marianela came to the U.S. from Venezuela and attended the University of Houston. She is organized for worker, immigrant, and voter rights. Marianela has worked with Mi Familia Vota and the Texas Civic Engagement Table. She currently works with Vote Riders and Common Cause to protect voting rights. As you can imagine, she has been very busy the last few months. It's Marianela. Maria Shaquin Espinoza. Where's Mike? It just used to be Maria Shaquin, but now there's an Espinoza on the end. Something happened there. Maria came to the U.S. from Guatemala with her parents, Carmen and her father, when she was 9 years old. While in high school, she organized her fellow students to support passage of the Texas DREAM Act. She is a leader of the Justice for Janitors program for SEIU Texas. Maria is married to Mike Espinosa and is represented here this evening by her wonderful and courageous mother and father, Carmen Shakeen and Mariano Shakeen. And just let me mention that sometime you have to hear their story, the story of that family, coming from Guatemala up here. They were down there during the extreme times of repression in the 1980s when so many people were killed. It's a beautiful story, and I'd like you sometime to tell that story for everybody to hear. Diana Gomez Mendoza, right here. Diana came to the U.S. from Mexico at age 6. She studied at the University of Houston, has worked in several local, state, and national campaigns on the issues of immigrant, women, worker, and GLBT rights. She received her master's degree in social work at the U of H and is working as a project manager for communities and schools in Houston, where she provides support and guidance to youth and their families. Diana. Where's my sheet on Sylvia? Oh, here we go. Hold on, folks. Okay, Sylvia Chicas, right over here. Right back here. Sylvia was inspired to work for justice in the community when she experienced the pain that families suffer when they are separated by our broken U.S. immigration system. She has worked for the Central American Resource Center, Mi Familia Vota, and has served as a board member at large with the National Alliance of Latin American Communities. She is currently going to the University of Houston and works as the Membership Services Coordinator for the Living Hope Wheelchair Association. Sylvia. And believe me, I've only described about half of what these young women do. I couldn't just put it all, it would take too much time. I think that all of them would say that they're representative of many outstanding Latinas working for peace and justice in Houston and Texas. So where is the, okay. I'm going to read one of these, and then we'll present them. Basically, we have a plaque for each one of them. We are proud to recognize these wonderful young Latinas, dynamic Latinas, for developing and using their personal power for the good of all, for peering into the future so that you can gather the tools and education now that will allow you to continue to emerge as forces for justice, for your passion, energy, and heart that moves and motivates others forward, for the promise of a brighter future that your work symbolizes. So we have an award for each one of these wonderful people. And I'll present this first one to Marianella, and each person will have a chance to say a few words.
Hello. Gracias al Centro de Paz y Justicia de Houston, claro que las peleas por los derechos humanos y la justicia social no viven en el espíritu del individuo, sino en nuestro espíritu colectivo. Por eso, para mí, este reconocimiento realmente es para nuestros ancestros, que resistieron y transformaron tanto que ahora nosotras podemos ser dinámicas, a mis abuelas, a mi madre, a todas las mujeres de nuestra historia de luchas compartidas. Este premio también es para el mujerero con los quienes trabajo, que me empujan, me apoyan y me inspiran. Mi hermana, Karina Bandas, Marisabel Carvajal, Lupe Hernández, Athena Laster, María Jiménez, Jessica Alvarenga, Keone Brown, Valeria Medina, Consuelo Martínez, Destiny Cannon, Marta Ojeda, Mercedes Herrera, Liliana Aguirre, Rocío Ramírez, Jennifer Sánchez, Silvia Rodríguez, Subria Labs, Nicala Asante, Ileana Salinas, Nicole Marín Baena y muchas, muchas otras conocidas y por conocer. Thank you again.
And Carmen, would you come forward and say a few words for your daughter?
Buenas noches. Muchas gracias a todas las personas que están presentes. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to see everybody here, and then I'm so glad to well, I'm not very proud to stay in the middle of the pretty girls, and then but I'm so say thank you for Houston centerpiece, because that we need. I'm so happy to see how many people working about the peace on the world. And then thank you so much for this for my daughter. And then she's not here because she's working. She's out of the town, and then, well, that's another way. That's why I'm here. So thank you so much. And then so proud of that girl because they are leader. And then gracias por reconocer a las mujeres latinas y las líderes, porque estas jóvenes son el futuro de nuestro mundo, y esto es lo que necesitamos. Muchas gracias a todos, gracias y...
Sylvia? Okay.
Thank you so much this evening to everyone that came here, and I feel extremely honored and unworthy of standing and sharing this stage with all of these women that each and every one of them have taught me something important about being a woman and exercising responsible leadership with integrity. So thank you to all of these women up here for everything that they've done for the community, because I've seen it firsthand, all of the sweat and tears and labor that they've given to the community with so much love and grace that it's difficult to put into words. But thank you to them. And just briefly mention that I'm grateful to the best Latina I know, which is my mother, who has made countless difficult decisions to be able to grant myself and my family opportunities that we otherwise would not have been able to see in El Salvador, where my family is from. Thank you to my brother Joel for accompanying me tonight, and I'm so grateful to just be a part of this tonight and to continue fighting the good fight in the future. Thank you so much, and have a good evening.
Well, I really want to thank everybody that's here. Quiero darle las gracias a todos los que están aquí, pero para mí es un honor recibir este homenaje, pero para mí sería mejor que este homenaje fuera a nombre de mi madre. So it's an honor for me to receive this award today, but I would really like for this award to be in the name of my mother, who is sitting in table number 4, que está sentada en mesa número 4. Porque si no fuera por ella, yo no estaría aquí. Because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. She showed me to be strong and to go for what I really believe in this world. She brought me to this country, and I know that it has been a lot of struggles for her to raise me and my siblings, but I know that deep down, I want to see more of her. And today I want to be able to definitely put her name in this plaque as well. Le quiero agradecer a mi madre porque ha sido por el valor que ella ha tenido para poder darnos a mí y a mis hermanos todo lo que ella pudo para que nosotros seamos mejores personas. So muchas gracias, madre. Te quiero mucho y lo que sigue todo es en tu honor.
Thank you. So I've been to the HPJC Center awards dinners twice. This is my 3rd time, but I never imagined I'd be getting an award. So I'm very honored to get an award, and especially sharing it with these ladies because I've seen the work that they've done behind the scenes, dedicated countless hours, evenings, weekends, sacrificed time with their families and everything else. And I also want to Obviously, one of my inspirations and my motivations has also been my mother, and she's worked hard. She's not very political, but she supports me in everything that I do, and she always has my back. But my grandparents actually were very political, and I think I got some of that from them. But I'm very happy to be here with HPJC, and I feel like HPJC is family, and I love all the causes that HPJC gets involved in, and all the community work that HPJC does as well. So thank you for this award, and thank you for everything that you do in the community.
Why don't we give one more big round of applause for all of our 5 awardees.
Thank you. You're welcome.
That was really moving, wasn't it? Our next person that I'm introducing, who's going to be the introducer, is Joe Marcinkowski. Joe is the person to go to when you have something that absolutely must be done, because Joe is organized, he knows how to do it, how to get it done, and he will do it every time. In that hotbed of political radicalism in Clear Lake, he has managed to organize the Clear Lake Social Justice Forum, which shows films, brings in guests, has discussion groups, and has kept on going, I don't know how long, but years. And it's been, I wouldn't like to have to lift that weight, and Joe does it like nothing. Joe Marcinkowski. Oh, yes. Okay, Joe reminds me, this is what I'm talking about, well organized. He reminds me that I am to give a little push for filling out the registration cards. We need group members and we need individual members. It is not expensive, and you can be part of this really wonderful organization. So please, fill out the cards that are on the table, and we'll be meandering around after the speech to collect them. Thanks.
And the question cards, how about the question?
Oh, the question cards, yes, the question cards. That's what I should have said. Sorry. What we are doing is going to use the cards that are on the table to write questions to Medea. We do not have time for lengthy questions, so just make sure that what you're asking her is concise and clear and something you really want to know. We'll be collecting those before and after she's through speaking. We'll do the questions and answers. Thanks.
Good evening. Before I get started, I wanted to recognize my daughter Danielle and granddaughter Riley, who drove in from Austin to hear Medea speak today. Maybe the genes work, and maybe we'll have an Austin Peace and Justice Center. So our honoree tonight is one of the nation's most prominent anti-war activists. She co-founded the women's-led grassroots activist group Code Pink in 2002. She's worked for 10 years as an economist and nutritionist in Latin America and Africa for the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Health Organization, and Swedish International Development Agency. She's written many books, including Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control. Make sure you buy it. There's only a few copies left. Get it tonight before you leave, and she'll sign it. She co-founded the Global Exchange on International Human Rights Organization, which Medea emerged as the key figure in an anti-sweatshop campaign to change the garment and shoe industry. Many of the Latinas in this room and other people in this room worked on the project of the Caravan of Peace, where 115 Mexican families came up here and visited 25 cities That was Global Exchange that sponsored that activity. That was Medea's operation that did that. Medea Benjamin started her activism at 15 in high school after being beat up in the gym. She decided to sit down with that girl who beat her and talk it through, which she did, and out of that came a peace group that learned peace songs and started singing outside the school and organizing walkouts from the school in opposition to the Vietnam War. Last year, late in the evening, that experience paid off at the School of America Watch Conference in Columbus, Georgia. We had a group of sheriff's deputies who always acted as Asian provocateurs, and they would try to get the young people to commit some minor offense that would find them in jail. Well, their faces were all recognized, so they decided to come down and harass the exhibitors. And there was a shouting match going on around 10 o'clock at night on Saturday before the vigil on Sunday. And suddenly, Medea steps in and leads the group in song and diffuses the whole operation. In 2012, Medea Benjamin was awarded the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation a Peace Prize in recognition of her creative leadership on the front lines of the anti-war movement. Previous recipients include Noam Chomsky, Dennis Kucinich, and Cindy Sheehan. Please help me to welcome Houston Peace and Justice Peacemaker of the Year awardee, Medea Benjamin.
I'm going to be on my tippy toes here. Thank you so much for this very, very wonderful honor and for such a beautiful evening and for being on the same stage with the other amazing honorees. I really feel so grateful and inspired to be in your presence. I wanted to talk tonight about, well, first let me give condolences for the elections. Sorry about that. But, you know, we don't have a lot of time to feel a lot of pity for ourselves. We got to keep on keeping on. And the other thing that just happened is that 3 days after the election, President Obama decided to send 1,500 more troops into Iraq, ask for $5 billion more of our tax dollars, 1.6 billion of it going to train again the very Iraqi army that we trained for 10 years at the cost to the taxpayers of $26 billion. So I'm feeling like, what the hell is going on? You know, you all here in Texas, I shouldn't blame you all, but you gave us George Bush. We had 8 years of that. And Diane and I were in Iraq before Bush invaded. And we had an opportunity to see what that society was like before the U.S. invaded. Yes, it was a dictator that was in power, but you know what? They had free education all the way until PhD, doctor, whatever you wanted to do, free. And guess what else they had? Free health care for everybody in the country. Guess what else they had? Oil. They had a lot of oil. And you Texans like the oil and have a lot of companies that like that oil. And so Bush went in, had nothing to do, you know, with 9/11, absolutely nothing to do with it, and decided, despite all the organizing that was being done to stop him, decided to go in and invade that country. What breaks my heart is what has happened to Iraq in the last 13 years. I mean, we saw a country that was still a middle-class country, with women who were free to be anything they wanted to be, with very, very well-educated people. And there had been tension between Sunnis and Shias for centuries, but you know what? They lived together in the same neighborhoods. You know what? They intermarried. I have a very good friend who runs an Iraqi women's organization, and she said that her father was Shia and her mother was Sunni, and it was never an issue in their family. And I said, what to you is the legacy of the U.S. invasion? And she said, we learned to hate each other. The legacy of the U.S. invasion, we learned to hate each other. And the U.S. took out a Sunni dictator and put in a Shia dictator. Put in a very repressive Shia government, sectarian, corrupt, and opened the gates of hell, really, to what's there now, which is ISIS. By disenfranchising all those Sunnis, many of them are looking to this very brutal organization, ISIS, and saying maybe that's what we should join to get some redress of our grievances. So we have George Bush to thank for ISIS. But you know, then Obama came in, and many of us thought it was going to be different. We thought, here is coming a president who understands that the $3 trillion that we've been spending on those wars, we needed here at home. Somebody who would understand that it wasn't worth the lives of thousands of our soldiers, and somebody who would understand all the pain and agony we had caused overseas. And instead, what we have is a kindler, gentler president who has basically kept the same policies in place. And so we are indeed on that very, very slippery slope where Obama keeps saying, no troops on the ground in Iraq, no troops on the ground in Iraq, and all the time he's sending troops on the ground in Iraq. And of course, the airstrikes. So I just want to do a quick little history lesson for you to look at what has happened after 13 years of the U.S., whether it's under Bush or whether it's under Obama, looking through a military lens to try to solve the problems, instead of going after individuals who attacked us, invading entire countries. Afghanistan. Yeah, there are some more women in school in Afghanistan than there were when we got there, but you know what? They can't stay in school. And you know why they can't stay in school? Because they're too poor, because their families need them to leave. And what are the other things that have come out of 13 years of being occupied by the richest country in the world? Still, Afghanistan is one of the poorest countries in the world, the worst place for women to give birth, the worst place for children to be born because of the level of infant mortality, the highest bumper crop of opium since we got there. And Transparency International, a group that looks at countries by their level of corruption and ranks them 1 to 175 countries, ranks Afghanistan tied for last place together with North Korea and Somalia. That's the results of 13 years of occupation. Now, we're being told we're going into Syria and Iraq right now for humanitarian reasons, but some of you might recall that we were told we were going into Libya for humanitarian reasons. And this is now under Obama. Humanitarian reasons, we went in and started the drone strikes, we started the airstrikes, because we were going to get rid of another dictator, Muammar Gaddafi. Well, we got rid of that dictator. And little do the American people know what a disaster came after that, just like the people in Iraq long for the days of the dictator Saddam Hussein. The people in Libya long for the days of the dictator Gaddafi. Because now what they have is a country that's broken up into all different fiefdoms run by warlords who each have guns that they looted from the central army that no longer exists. And it basically is a country in civil war that is ungovernable. That's the legacy of the humanitarian intervention. When Obama gave his speech on September 10th and talked about us bombing Syria, I was listening very carefully. And one of the things he said we were going to do is look at the example of Yemen, the successful example of Yemen, to see what we were going to do in Syria. Well, I had just come from Yemen, and let me tell you, I don't know what President Obama is talking about. Yemen is a disaster, and the U.S. has contributed to that. In fact, under Obama, he started a campaign of using drones to kill people in Yemen. For anybody who doesn't know about drones, well, I do have a book out there that I'd love you to get, but the basics of it is you don't even have to go to the battlefield or even near it. You can be right here. In fact, you can literally be right here. Where is your base? Ellington. You can be right in Ellington. And you can be in an air-conditioned room, and you can be sitting in an ergonomic chair, and you can be told to press a button and kill people thousands of miles away. People who have never had a chance to surrender. People have never been accused of anything. People have never been tried of anything, and certainly have never been convicted of anything. And this has become the weapon of choice of the Obama administration. And in Yemen, where I visited, I was just appalled to see the results of these drone strikes. For example, there's a young man that we met, Farah al-Muslini. He said he lives in a village that's so tiny it doesn't appear on Google Maps. And that the U.S. must have thought there was some terrible high-level al-Qaeda person in that village. And he said, we know everybody in the village, and it would just be crazy to think there was a high-level al-Qaeda person there. And if there was, somebody should have told us, and we would go knock on his door and turn him in. Instead, the village heard buzzing and buzzing and buzzing for days and weeks at a time, and then suddenly the drone strike blows up the family of this person. No explanation, who, why. He said what the U.S. did in an instant, the extremists could never have done, which is turn the entire village against the United States. I met a man from a very large tribe, a very respected man in his community, whose brother was driving a taxi, picked up some strangers, and about a half an hour into the ride, suddenly from the sky comes a Hellfire missile, blows up the entire taxi, including his brother and the two passengers. Now, this man that I met, Mohammed Al-Gawi, he said he's been trying to get some explanation from the United States about why they killed his brother. He said that in his tribal culture, if you commit a crime or a terrible mistake, you have to do something about it. You have to acknowledge what you did, you have to apologize, and you have to provide some kind of compensation to the family. This man left 3 young children behind, a young widow behind. He said, the United States won't even acknowledge that they killed my brother. And he said to me, could it be that our tribal culture is more evolved when it comes to justice than the United States of America? I was in the home of a mother who told me that her 3 young boys were so disgusted with the government that was so corrupt and was capturing and putting young people in jail and mistreating them, that they joined a group that was fighting the government. They didn't know much about it, but it was called Al-Qaeda. And they were 18, 19, and 21 years old. They were kids. And she said they joined the wrong group. Does it sound familiar to some mothers here? Kids join the wrong gang. Unfortunately, it happens a lot in our society. But we don't think our government should go in and drop missiles on them, do we? She said, my sons needed rehabilitation. My sons needed some skills, some future, some options in their life. My sons needed a government that wasn't so corrupt. And instead, what they got was Hellfire missiles from Predator drones from the United States. She said, my sons didn't know even where the United States was, had no interest in hurting anybody from the United States, and yet your government killed them. So here we are killing young people in places like Yemen and Pakistan and Somalia who were babies when 9/11 happened, had nothing to do with 9/11. And we are creating more enemies. In fact, the proof in Yemen is that when Obama started that campaign in 2009, there were maybe 200 people who were part of the group called Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and now there's over 1,000. And Yemen is on the brink of an all-out civil war. It is certainly no success at all. And so when you look at what these 13 years have wrought, have we eliminated extremism? We have caused it to morph from one country to another country to another country, from the Taliban to Al-Qaeda to ISIS. We now have extremist groups that are in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, Somalia, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, Mali, Nigeria, throughout northern Africa, even in Egypt now. We certainly have had no success at all. And so when somebody ever says to you, if you think that we are naive because we don't think that there are military solutions to these problems, tell them that they are insane because we have tried military solutions for 13 years and it has not worked. Yes, ISIS is terrible, but what we are doing is counterproductive. Let me give you a couple of reasons why. One is that ever since the U.S. began its bombing campaign, this has been used through a very sophisticated social media campaign that ISIS uses to recruit thousands more young people. And it gives justification to say that ISIS is defending the Muslim people and ISIS is defending them against the United States. Another reason it's counterproductive is because we are putting now more weapons into that region when it's a region that is too overloaded with weapons. And you know who ends up getting the weapons? The fiercest, most brutal fighters. And that is groups like Al-Qaeda and groups like ISIS. And so the very weapons that we've been dropping in to the supposed moderates in Syria have already been picked up by ISIS and being used. And where did ISIS get its weapons to begin with? From Iraq. And where did Iraq get its weapons? From us. So we are funding the cycle of violence through our weapons. The other thing we are doing is inadvertently we are strengthening another dictator, and that is Assad in Syria. Well, how are we doing that? So you have the moderate rebels, you have the extremists, and you have a brutal government. We go in on behalf, supposedly, working to get the extremists, and we are letting Assad off the hook, and so he goes after the moderates. So he's killing the moderates that we're supposed to be working with. And we are strengthening the dictator that our friends and allies, the moderates, are much more concerned about overthrowing Assad than they are with trying to fight ISIS. So it is extremely complicated, and what we are doing is adding more complications to the mix. We're also strengthening other repressive regimes in the region. And when John Kerry went around and created this coalition, included in this coalition, in fact, high up on the list of this coalition, are Arab dictatorships that are repressing their own people. And one of them is the country that is probably the most responsible country for extremism in the Middle East, and that is Saudi Arabia. That's right. Saudi Arabia is where the ideology of Wahhabism extremism comes from. Saudi Arabia, I mean, we have been disgusted by the 4 beheadings of US and British young men that we have seen. But Saudi Arabia does beheadings all the time. Saudi Arabia last year beheaded 79 people, and they do it in public in a square called the Chop Chop Square. And here we are going to take the moderates from Syria and take them to Saudi Arabia to teach them how to fight? I don't think that's a very good idea. And the US, instead of holding Saudi Arabia at a distance and saying this is not the kind of regime we want to be close to, well, we know how close George Bush was to the Saudis. And in the Obama administration, they've concluded the biggest weapons deal in the history of humankind with Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is furnishing money, is furnishing weapons to the extremists. And the US is holding up dictatorships like Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, like Bahrain, part of this coalition. It doesn't make any sense. And in fact, it also is emboldening Israel to continue its assault on the Palestinians under the cover of this war on terror that is raging throughout the Middle East. So let me talk about things that could be done that would provide some real solutions. In Iraq, I mentioned that the U.S. put in place a sectarian government. Now we have to push for a government in Iraq that truly represents all the people, Sunni, Shia, and Kurds. And we should condition any support that the United States gives on results in seeing an end to the sectarianism of the government. We should demand that there be another round of peace talks between the Syrian regime and the rebels, because there needs to be a truce between them so that together they can focus on ISIS. And I was in Geneva. We brought 40 Syrian women to the first round of peace talks. And we asked our Secretary of State to push for them to be seated at the table as well, because we said you're never going to come to peace when the only ones at the table are the guys with the guns. You need some women there. But nobody would listen to the Syrian women. Nobody would allow them a seat at the table. There needs to be a new round of peace talks with civil society, especially women, at the table. We can also give ongoing support to civil society that is trying to find nonviolent solutions. And humanitarian aid, the winter is coming. People by the millions have been forced to flee their homes, and they're living in the most precarious conditions in countries like Turkey, like Lebanon, like Jordan. And with winter coming on, there will be tremendous disease, tremendous hunger. And the World Food Program that I used to work for is saying they don't even have half of what they need to take care of the population. Instead of spending the billions of dollars that President Obama just asked for on more weapons, we should spend that money on helping the poor refugees. And speaking of humanitarian aid, if we really want to help people, another thing we could do is provide clean drinking water for the 1.8 million people in Gaza who no longer have any clean drinking water. The other thing we have to do is talk to our adversaries like the Russians. Instead of demonizing them, we need them. And to Iran, a country where I just returned from about 2 weeks ago. Now, what the U.S. is doing, focusing on Iran's nuclear facilities, is totally counterproductive, hypocritical, given that Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons, never allows any, doesn't even admit it has it, does not allow any kind of inspections. But Iran knows that it has to go along because the sanctions have really hurt Iran, and they need those sanctions lifted. And so they have been working very diligently with the United States, and this is one example, a positive example, where our government is actually trying diplomacy. And that deal around the nuclear issue is supposed to come to a conclusion at the end of this month, on November 24th. Unfortunately, there are lots of people in our government, particularly Republicans, but also some Democrats, that are trying to quash that deal. We need that deal to go through because we need peace with Iran, not only to avert a horrendous war with Iran, but also because we need Iran to find peace in the entire region. They are a very, very important player in the region, and there will never be peace unless we start talking with and dealing with Iran as a dignified nation that deserves our respect. So, how do we move in that direction with the political scene we have now in the United States? It's a tough one, and it just got tougher after these last elections. And you know, Obama has been pushed and pushed to be, quote, tougher and tougher by people like John McCain And God knows why John McCain gets a megaphone on the mainstream media all the time to spew his hatred and to spew his talk about Obama has to be tougher and tougher and tougher when everything John McCain has advocated for has gone wrong. It's going to be tough to build up a strong peace movement when our peace movement really dissolved as soon as Obama came into power. We had a very, very strong, vibrant peace movement under the 8 years of Bush, but people thought Obama was going to bring us that peace we so wanted. Some people thought it was partisan politics and let's not criticize a Democratic president. Some people were very, very and rightfully excited by the first black president ever and said, we got to give him time. Some people were caught up in the horrible economic crisis that hit our nation and were focused instead on things like saving their own homes and dealing with student debt and trying to hold together their communities. For a whole host of reasons, the peace movement fizzled out. And so we're at a point today when we see our country getting back into the wars, and we don't have the movement there that's going to be a countervailing force to the military-industrial complex that keeps these wars going. And let's face it, right here in your state, you've got more than your fair share of this military-industrial complex that keeps us in this cycle of violence. In fact, I looked up the number of contracts in Houston alone with companies that do deals with the military, and last year it was 3,507 contracts with the military. Billions of dollars just in Houston of deals with the military. So how do we build that countervailing force? Well, we've got a couple of things going for us. And I think the biggest thing going for us is that although the American people supported initially this bombing now in Iraq and Syria, it's not going to be for long. Because they're going to see that it's not working. And because they've seen 13 years of U.S. military intervention. And 6 months ago, we had the American people with us. The polls showed that the vast majority were against any kind of further military involvement in the Middle East. So with time and our educational work, we're going to help turn that back around. And in the meantime, what we have to do is what you're doing right here with your Houston Peace and Justice Center. And I'm very inspired seeing all the connections that you make on a regular basis that's manifested here tonight with the people who've been awarded, with the people who are here in this room. We have to spread this throughout the country and show that you can't build a peace movement that's all white, that's older people like myself who come from the Vietnam War days. This is not how we can build a vibrant peace movement. It has to have a strong youth component to it. And in my organization, we just the young people put out a youth manifesto called There Is No Future in War. And they held a meeting yesterday with 40 representatives, young people of different organizations, and they are out there building a youth component to the peace movement. And just like you were making connections with the environmental movement, so we have to do that on a national level, because what's the biggest polluter in the world? It's the U.S. military. What are the reasons we go to war? It's for resources like oil. These are so interconnected. And I know some of you in this room are working on the issue of money in politics and how it's so corrupted our democratic system. Well, look at the military contractors and how much money they throw into every single election. This is all so interwoven. And then talking about building a movement that has diversity to it, let's look at the manifestation of militarism overseas right here in our own community. The militarization of our police forces here at home. And who is bearing the brunt of that militarization? It's communities of color, it's black communities, it's brown communities, it's Arab American communities, it's immigrant communities. They are the ones that are feeling this. And it's our tax dollars that's going to fund it, because we have 3 national entities, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice, each of them with billions of dollars of our tax money that they are throwing at local police departments to gear them up with everything from MRAPs, tanks, grenades, assault weapons, grenade launchers, drones. Thank you, drones. And in fact, it's right here in Montgomery County where one of your police, the county sheriff, got a Homeland Security grant for, I think, $200,000, got a very fancy drone. But it's a great story, because when they did the press conference to show off the drone, it was the SWAT team. And, you know, they were dressed up like they were in Fallujah, not here in Montgomery County. And they had the tank behind them, and they had all their guns ready. And then they started manipulating this drone, and it went up in the air, and they were all so happy about the drone, and burn, until the drone crashed right into the tank. So I was in Ferguson at the national mobilization that happened just a couple of weeks ago. And it was amazing to see the young people in that community and what they are doing, getting out on the streets every single day and saying, we will not forget Michael Brown. We will not forget the young people who are being gunned down in our communities every single day. And it was such an honor to be out there with them. And now we have an opportunity to connect these issues of militarization overseas with militarization right here at home. And we better do that. And we better look at our own communities. We do not need, nor do we want, tanks in our communities. We do not want, nor do we need drones in our communities. Our police officers should be serving and protecting us, not treating us as the enemy. So I just want to give you a couple of positive things that have happened in the last 2 years to say that you can fight the military-industrial complex as big as it is. I mentioned the negotiations with Iran, but I failed to say that there is a big lobby group in the United States, the largest foreign policy lobby group called AIPAC, that has been trying to stop any kind of negotiations and has wanted the U.S. to go in and bomb Iran. But enough of us have been organizing and creating a countervailing force so that AIPAC has not been able to win so far, and we have to keep that record going. Another positive example of what we have done is around the drones, because just a couple of years ago, nobody even knew that our government was killing thousands of people with drones. And in fact, our government was lying to us. The Obama administration was lying and saying they weren't using drones, and then when it was just too hard to keep saying they weren't using drones, they lied to us and said that no civilians were being killed by those drones. And we came up with proof, and we brought people here from Yemen, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, whose loved ones had been killed. And finally, they admitted and said, we're going to change our policies so that we're going to try to just kill the bad guys. Well, we said, you don't know who those bad guys are because they're thousands of miles away and you never give them a chance to even have a trial. So you should just stop using those drones. They're using them less, but we have more to go. One thing we have done is we're starting to turn public opinion around, which was way in favor of drones, to one that is getting much more skeptical about their use. And we have built up a national movement. In every place where the drones are being operated here in the United States, there are groups that are going to those bases and are protesting those drones. There are weekly protests at the CIA, at the Pentagon, in front of the White House around the drones. And what I'm proudest of is that we've built a global movement where we are connected to the people who are the victims of our policies. We're working directly with them. We're helping them create organizations of drone victims that are going en masse to the U.S. Embassy and demanding redress for their families. We're also working with groups throughout Europe to tell their governments not to buy new drones. Israel is the largest exporter of drones in the world, and we are working throughout the world to say stop the proliferation, and we're trying to get a ban at the United Nations for the use of what's called autonomous killer drones. A very, very exciting campaign. And lastly is the example around Syria itself, where just a year and a half ago, in August of 2013, Obama said that Syria had crossed the red line and he was going to go in there and start bombing, this time to take out the Assad regime. There was a massive uprising of the American people to say no. And it was something that I've never seen in my life. Because I live in Washington, D.C. right now, and we created a camp out outside of Congress. We called it a peace insurrection, and we were there 24 hours a day, and we put out the word for people to come. We had a big board there with the names of the Congress people who were still undecided, and we were sending people all the time into Congress to go and lobby their offices. Well, there was a Tea Party convention going on at the same time, and they had a lot of people in town. And I thought, what the hell, let's go over to the Tea Party and see if we can get any of them to join us. So we went over to the Tea Party, and I'm pretty good at grabbing the mic, and I got up on stage, and I grabbed the mic, and I said, how many of you want to see us go into another war in the Middle East? And they were like, no, we don't really want that. And then I said, how many of you would want to see President Obama drag us into another war in the Middle East? And they said, no, no, no. So we said, come on down to the Congress where we are, and we'll help you lobby. And they came en masse out of the convention